Have you ever got a wedding invitation and thought, wow, I never would have put those two together. They're a real mismatch. Maybe you said, what does he see in her? Or the opposite, what does she see in him? Hi, I'm Pastor Jeff Hartman, Troy First Baptist Church. Welcome to our Sunday evening service for July 14th from Song of Solomon, chapter 3 and 4, entitled, What Does He See in Her? Sometimes there are two opposites that you would never imagine having anything in common, a mismatch. And maybe it is like my wife and I. When we first announced our engagement, many people who knew us thought we didn't really go together. We traveled together for an entire year, not dating, and we're friends. But the guys who I talked to said, what do you think of Lynn? And I said, I pity the guy who marries her, because he'll just be lost in her mess. And she tells me that the girls asked her, what do you think of Jeff? And she said, I pity the girl who marries him because she'll just be another book on his shelf. Well, we got together, and it may have seemed a mismatch to some because of lack of commonality, or some because someone is out of the other one's league. Maybe she's a solid 10 and he's a run-of-the-mill 5. Or maybe it's not just looks. Maybe he's filthy rich and she doesn't seem to have much to offer. Neither good-looking or a trophy wife. Shallow people might ask our title today, what does he see in her? Well, in this case, you have been invited to the wedding of the king. And the king is marrying a commoner as we study the book of Song of Solomon, the one Old Testament book about love and sex. Remember, we saw last week that God invented sex, called it good, and then dedicated one whole book of the Bible to the subject of love and sex. We're entitling this series, Sex is Not a Four-Letter Word. And at this apparently mismatched wedding, the bride wonders, what does he see in me? And some of us in the pews wonder the same thing. Why is he marrying her? He is a king, and she is a nobody. Well, here we get to find out, because in his vows at the ceremony, he will tell us what he sees in her. And actually, in this very frank book, we've been invited not only to the wedding and the reception, but the honeymoon. And we will overhear his intimate expressions of love and ecstasy, and we'll find out exactly what he does see in her. Join me in Song of Solomon, chapter 3, beginning in verse 6, in the wedding procession. Now, most girls dream about the big day they'll get married. I guess it's safe to say most guys don't care as much about the ceremony as they do about the honeymoon afterwards. But the girls seem to obsess over every detail of the wedding, the gown, the decorations, the music. And here is the bride telling us about the procession. Who is this coming out of the wilderness like pillars of smoke perfumed with myrrh and frankincense, with all the merchants' fragrant powders? This is she speaking. We can tell from the language of the pronouns. Who is this coming is a feminine pronoun. So it's literally, what girl is this? Who is this girl? She's really a nobody from nowhere coming out of the wilderness. And the cultured elite from Jerusalem might be thinking, who is this hick from the woods? The hick from the sticks? What does he see in her? The procession is not walking down an aisle to the tune of Here Comes the Bride or Pachelbel's Canon in D. It's an entourage, a caravan carrying her from the wilderness to the big city. So it is stirring up pillars of smoke, and that's all they can see from a distance. But they can smell her coming, perfumed with myrrh and frankincense, with all the merchants' fragrant powders. Did you ever know somebody who wore so much perfume or cologne that you could smell them 5 minutes before they got there? She says in verse 7, answering the question, who is this? Behold, it is Solomon's couch. But it's not bringing Solomon, it's bringing Solomon's bride. It is Solomon's couch with 60 valiant men around it, of the valiant of Israel. They all hold swords, being expert in war. Every man has his sword on his thigh because of fear in the night. The bridegroom has sent a limo to pick up his bride. And here's why they're stirring up pillars of smoke. There are 60 valiant men surrounding the couch. These are his Secret Service agents, his bodyguards. Because here is the first answer to what does he see in her. A, he sees someone to protect. These 60 valiant men all hold swords, being expert in war. Why? Because it is a dangerous place and a dangerous time. It's a 50-mile trip from Shunem, her hometown, to Jerusalem, the capital, and would take at least one overnight stay somewhere. So because of fear in the night, he has sent these 60 men, because he considers her to be of great value. And what we value, we protect. I mean, you only protect what is valuable. You don't put a lock and key on your garbage. You might leave your garbage out all week unlocked. But your valuables, you don't leave them outside or unlock your doors. You put them in a safe place. And your loved ones are what you want to protect most, right? Even before the actual ceremony begins, he tells her and he tells us that he sees in her someone to protect, someone he considers to be of great value. So today, protecting her might be killing a spider or a bug, like I often have to do. It might be opening the door for her, which I often do. It might actually mean fighting to protect her, which I don't have to do very often. But how much better to keep her safe so you don't need to fight? It certainly means fighting for her spiritually, being a spiritual leader, praying for her and praying with her. This is what Christ does for his bride in Ephesians 5:25. He loved her and gave himself for her. So what do you see in her, Solomon? Protecting her means that he values her, he wants her to feel safe and valued, and it makes him feel like a man. Verses 9 and 10 say, of the wood of Lebanon, Solomon the king made himself a palanquin. That's a raised royal seat or booth, a throne that's carried on the shoulders of workers. He made its pillars of silver, its support of gold, its seat of purple, its interior paved with love by the daughters of Jerusalem. Either Solomon comes to pick her up, or he had it made himself and sent for her. Either way, he has, as we read in John 14, prepared a place for her. And it's luxurious, because here is the second answer to the question, what does he see in her? He sees someone to treasure. He is a rich king, and his best is pretty good. Silver pillars, gold supports, East Carolina purple velour seats, interior paved with love. Maybe that means it's decorated with hearts. They didn't use hearts to symbolize love. They did palm trees, but maybe it's more erotic art. It's his best because he treasures her. So today, treasuring her might be taking her out to McDonald's if you don't have a lot. If you have a little bit more, maybe it's Panera if you can't afford Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. It might be a picnic basket if you can't afford even McDonald's, but it means your best. It might be a new coat of paint if you can't afford silver and gold, and green if you can't afford purple. But it definitely means your best, because anything less wouldn't be paved with love. In Song of Solomon 3:11, the bride and groom arrive in Jerusalem, and King Solomon gets the blessing of his mother, the queen mother, Bathsheba. Go forth, O daughters of Zion, and see King Solomon with the crown, with his mother crowned him on the day of his espousals, the day of gladness of his heart, with the approval of his parent. It is a blessed day, a day of gladness. I have had the privilege of marrying 2 cousins, 6 nephews. I marry another one this month. But most of all, I've had the privilege of marrying my 2 sons. And what a blessing it is to stand down there at the altar, not sit in the front pew like most fathers, but stand there and have my son and his bride give their vows one to another, as I not only lead them in their vows, but give them some counsel, encourage him to protect her and to treasure her, as I have tried to protect and treasure their mother, my wife, because that is what God commands. And that is what God does for us. God treasures us, and he gave his very best for us. God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. So what do you see in her? Treasuring her makes her feel special and loved and makes him a rich man. Now in Song of Solomon 4:1, the wedding ceremony can begin. The bride has arrived. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today. She narrated the procession, but now he narrates the ceremony. As a matter of fact, he begins with the wedding vows. I, Solomon, take you, whatever her name is. He tells her how beautiful she looks, which is never a bad idea. Behold, you are fair, my love. And then he repeats himself, which is not a bad idea. Behold, you are fair. Tells her twice. She's wearing a veil. Your dove's eyes behind your veil. And that's a custom that still survives to this day. And he starts getting very specific in his praise for her. And he starts from the top and he works his way down. You have dove's eyes behind your veil. I don't know if you've ever seen a dove, but its eyes are no more beautiful than a pigeon's eyes. They're small, black, and beady. This is not a romantic way that you ought to imitate Solomon. Dove's eyes doesn't sound great to me. But then he seems to get worse. Your hair is like a flock of goats. Now, goats are not beautiful animals, are they? But try that one today. Seems to me goats are wild and smelly. 1 Corinthians 11:15 tells us that a woman's hair is her glory. And most women spend a lot of time on it, so most men would do well to notice it and to appreciate it. But you might try something more up to date than, oh, your hair looks like a flock of goats. Verse 2, going down from Mount Gilead, your teeth are like a flock of shorn sheep which have come up from the washing. Well, at least you brushed them. So a flock of sheep? Wow, hon, your teeth are so white and you're hardly missing any of them. Seems like a rather clumsy compliment now, but don't miss the point. Each one bears twins and none is barren among them. Wow, you got all your teeth and you even cleaned them. Here is the third answer to our question, what does he see in her? A, he sees someone to focus on. Someone whose beauty he can appreciate and admire. Someone he can ogle. Remember last week in chapters 1 and 2, we pointed out that men, are wired to be aroused by sight, where she is wired to be aroused by touch. She wants to be held. He wants to see something. He wants an eyeful. Well, God did a good job by making her and giving him something to look at. Someone said, I'm sure it was a man, that God made her beautiful so he'd go for her, and he made her not so bright so she'd go for him. Now, the second half is certainly sexist and not true. I'm not sure who it's more insulting to. But the first half sure is true. God made her beautiful so he would be attracted to her, right? We say it's not polite to stare. What's a man to do? What a man's to do is to find one woman and stare, focus on her beauty. And I've been doing that with my wife for next month, 38 years. She should appreciate the attention, and he will appreciate God's creation. He sees someone to focus on in verse 3. Your lips are like a strand of scarlet, and your mouth is lovely. He's moving down. Your temples behind your veil are like a piece of pomegranate. Notice he's ogling her and describing her. Scarlet and lovely are much better than beady dove's eyes and smelly farm animals. Better than teeth like sheep. But then he comes to her temples. I never once admired my wife's temples, but this is probably the way that the Hebrews would refer, not to your mind. Oh, your mind is beautiful too. Probably talking more about the cheeks in front of the temples, and he compares them to pomegranates. Maybe she's blushing and they're rosy. Pomegranates are pink and rosy, and by the way, they're full of seeds. This may be a reference to fertility. Verse 4, your neck, moving down a little bit further, is like the Tower of David, built for an armory, on which hang 1,000 bucklers, all shields of mighty men. So when he gets to his neck, he says it's like an army tower, strong, dignified, your head held high. Men and women, I encourage you both to hold your head high. It will make you look better, and it will make you feel better. And then verse 5, he's going down, and inevitably he comes to your two breasts are like two fawns, twins of a gazelle, which feed among the lilies. We mentioned on Sunday morning a few weeks ago that men do have a fascination with breasts. Here, he describes them with unabashed sensuality, and he does go back to the barnyard animal metaphors with two fawns. Beautiful, cute, can't keep your eyes or your hands off of them. And get this, twins, two, which is why he says, God gave me two eyes and two hands, right? And oh, they're twins, they match. Seems kind of racy for a Sunday message, but that's only because the church has allowed sex to become a four-letter word. As we saw last week, God invented sex. He made it beautiful, and he called it good. And God made women's breasts, and he made them beautiful. There are a few things that are more amazing and unexplainable than the male obsession with female breasts. Half of the human population have them, and the other half of the population are fascinated by them. So what do we do with that? Deny our humanity? No. Here is the fourth answer to our question, what does he see in her? He sees someone to fulfill him. Solomon advises us in Proverbs 5:19, men, let her breasts, your wife's breasts, satisfy you at all times, and always be enraptured with her love. Here, he does not get prudish. He's not against all sexual delight. No, the Bible doesn't get preachy and say, get over that childish fascination. No, it actually says indulge that fascination, but only with one woman. Focus on her and let her fulfill you. And here is where the Bible is so realistic and so practical. If he indulges his temptation to focus on the female form, his good desire given to him by God becomes frustrating and destructive. If he focuses on that good thing, female beauty, in strangers, classmates, co-workers, or worse, in pornography, he stirs up his passions and either defrauds himself with no fulfillment, no sexual release, no relationship, no commitment, no love, or it drives him to immorality with several women, impersonal, unloving, demeaning relationships, or no relationships at all, bringing shame and guilt. The focus demands fulfillment, because focus without fulfillment leads to frustration. That's like looking at pictures of food and getting hungry and drooling, but never actually taking a bite. That would be torture, wouldn't it? The solution is not starvation. It's looking at the food on your plate. What happens if you focus on someone else's plate? Quite often when we go out to eat, my wife will say, oh, I should have got what you ordered. She always wants what I ordered. Well, next time, just order what I order and you'll be happy. But if you don't look at what's on someone else's plate, you look at what's your own plate, you can enjoy it more. It's so simple. Proverbs 5:19 says, let her breasts satisfy you at all times and always be enraptured with her love. Let it. It's up to you. Staring at what is someone else's plate cannot bring satisfaction and only leads to frustration and sin. Don't do that to yourself, let alone to her. So guys, protect your eyes. Protect your heart. Check up other women from the neck up. Yes, God made women beautiful. So at school, at the office, at the beach, in the magazine, on the web, protect your eyes. Eye doctors tell us to wear sunglasses to protect our eyes from UV rays from the sun. And so we spend billions a year, mostly not to protect our eyes, but to look cool. But some men wear sunglasses just so they can look wherever they want to look and no one knows where they're looking, especially at the beach. You know, better than wearing sunglasses at the beach, maybe you ought to wear blinders so you can focus on not the wrong parts of other women, which only leads to frustration, but you can focus on what you should focus on, just your wife. So start where Solomon started, at the top. Admire their eyes, their hair, their lips, their teeth, their cheeks, their neck, yes, their breasts. But if you're looking at other women, start at the top and stop at the neck. A long time ago, I went to a motivational seminar by a great speaker named Zig Ziglar. And he said people who had an attitude problem needed to get a checkup from the neck up. And that's always a good thing. Change your thinking and you change your life. But from that, I borrowed, I'm going to look at women. I'm going to check up women from the neck up. I can notice another beautiful woman and her beautiful hair and eyes and face, but that's as far as I want to go. Oftentimes my wife will ask me, did you notice what so-and-so was wearing? Nope. I saw her eyes, I saw her face, and that was all. I've tried to train my eyes to look from the neck up. And so, like Job says in Job 31:1, I've made a covenant with my eyes to check up women from the neck up, and it helps. It doesn't awaken lust, it doesn't lead to temptation and frustration, and it doesn't undermine my marriage. Guys, I advise you, try it. In Song of Solomon 4:6, now we have come to the honeymoon. The bride and the groom have kissed and been pronounced man and wife. The ceremony is over, and the honeymoon begins. And in this unique book, we've not only been invited to the wedding and the feast, but to the honeymoon. She narrated the procession, he narrated the ceremony, but now she narrates the honeymoon. Verse 6, until the day breaks, that means it's night, and the shadows flee away, I will go my way to the mountain of myrrh and to the hill of frankincense. Now that's a lot of perfume, isn't it? You ever walk into one of those department stores in the mall and then get hit by the perfume, which is right there by the door, and that wall of perfume gives you an instant headache? What does myrrh and frankincense remind us of? It reminds us of what the wise men brought to the manger. It also reminds us of what the women brought to the tomb to anoint Jesus' body. Verse 7, he says, you are all fair, my love. There is no spot in you. He again declares in public, but now even he's done so twice at the wedding ceremony, but now on the honeymoon, he takes her in his arms and he says it again in private. You are all fair. There is no spot in you. This is nearly quoted word for word by Paul in Ephesians chapter 5, as Christ calls his bride spotless. Not only means flawless, but it means pure. And her purity only enhances her beauty. Verse 8, he says, come with me from Lebanon, my spouse, with me from Lebanon. Look from the top of Amana, from the top of Sinir, from Hermon, from the lion's dens, and the mountains of the leopards. Let's get away. Let's get some alone time. Next month is my wife and I's 38th anniversary, and we're going to get away, even if it's only for a night. Sometimes leaving a crowded reception after a busy day of a wedding, getting away from all those guests is like getting away from a lion's den. And so he says, come on, let's get away. In verse 9, he says, you have ravished my heart, my sister, my spouse. You have ravished my heart with one look of your eyes. Now that we're all alone, except for all those people that you invited to the honeymoon, let's see, where was I, he says. Pick up where I left off. You have ravished my heart. Now guys, here's a place to start taking notes. You don't want to tell her hair looks like goats or her teeth like sheep. That may not work anymore, but this one will still work. You have ravished my heart. Have you been reading romance novels, Pastor Hartman? Yeah, actually, I've been reading Song of Solomon. You've ravished my heart with one look of your eyes. She bats her eyelashes at him, and he's toast. She gives him one come hither look, and he gets the message. And here is the fifth answer to what does he see in her. He sees the way that she looks at him. It's not just a one-way street. He looks at her, and he sees things in her, but she looks at him too. He's pursuing her, but she's not running away. There's an attraction between two people, and she's not playing fair with the beauty that God gave her and the looks that she's giving him. He hasn't got a chance. He's ravished. But there's something in her look that is different than the way that he looks at her. She's definitely not ogling him. You see, the difference is she sees what he does. He sees how she looks. He focuses on the outside, how she looks, how God made her on the outside. She's deeper, less shallow. She focuses on the inside, what he does and who he is. Now, in many ways, this is unfair. Men tend to be attracted to women because of looks and physical beauty, but that is subjective and God-given. But rather than fight it, ladies, understand it and use it to your advantage. Look your best to attract the right guy or to keep the right guy. And guys, if you're not blessed with handsome features, your lucky women aren't as shallow as men and will usually look past that if you actually do something they can admire. In high school, the campus beauty may not date the best looking guy. She may date the quarterback of the football team who may not be good looking at all, but she looks at what he does. So make something of yourself, men, to attract the right girl or to keep the right girl. And it certainly wouldn't hurt to run a comb through your hair once in a while and smell a little bit better and dress nicely as well. But if you understand the difference between a man and a woman, not only physically, but emotionally, as 1 Peter says, 3:7, husbands, dwell with your wife with understanding, you'll be much better off. Ignorance in regards to this is not bliss. Understand what makes him or her tick, and you'll both be happier. So, he sees how she looks, and hopefully he is bright enough to compliment her on it, because here is how a woman is wired. She needs attention. She sees what he does. And this is perfect, because here is how a man is wired. He needs admiration. The big difference between men and women. She needs attention. Just listen to what I say. He needs admiration. Tell me how wonderful I am, because we're so insecure. Ephesians 5:33 tells us, husband, love your wife because he needs the reminder. But more than that, she needs the attention. And it concludes, wife, respect your husband, mostly because he needs admiration so much. Don't miss this. If you want to affair-proof your marriage, give your spouse what they need, and they won't go looking for it elsewhere. My mother used to say to us kids quite often, if you give him steak at home, he won't be attracted by hamburger elsewhere. You know what? I have a sneaky suspicion, looking back, she might have been talking not about food, but about sex. As a matter of fact, most affairs don't start with sex. The stake is not physical intimacy. The stake is attention for a woman and admiration for a man. And here's how almost every affair starts. He goes to work, and some woman tells him how much she admires him. She admires his car, she admires his work, she admires something, and she fulfills in him a need that he doesn't get at home, because at home he pictures his wife as nagging and never says anything positive about him. And so his heart is drawn to this woman who may not even be as good looking as his own wife, but his heart is drawn to her because she is giving him his manly need for admiration. Same thing goes the other way. She goes to work, she goes to school, she goes to the meeting, and there's a man there who notices her hair. There's a man who pays attention to her, who listens to her stories. Oftentimes preachers get into trouble because a preacher will listen to a woman complain about her husband. And when he pays attention to her, she's drawn to him. He may not be as well off as her husband. Oftentimes she'll leave her husband, who's much more rich or much more better looking, for someone who just pays attention to her because that's what she needs. Lavish what he needs, admiration. Lavish what she needs, attention, on them. And not only do you affair-proof your marriage, you will make your marriage more of a celebration in the bedroom as well. In verse 11, still on the honeymoon, you thought it was awkward overhearing their intimate love talk. Now the festivities begin. Your lips, O my spouse, drip as the honeycomb. Your lips, O my spouse, drip as the honeycomb. Honey and milk are under your tongue, and the fragrance of your garments is like the fragrance of Lebanon. There's a lot of erotic language going on here, all of it coded for making love. His love is increased for her, not only in giving herself to him, but in the fact that she has saved herself for him. Verse 12, a garden enclosed is my sister, my spouse, a spring shut up, a fountain sealed. Notice what he's saying. He's giving us the sixth and final answer to what he sees in her. She has saved herself for him. Sometimes you hear someone say, I'm saving myself for marriage. Well, you don't save yourself for something, an institution. You save yourself for your marriage partner. You're saving yourself for someone special, a husband or wife. He's saying now the saving is over and there is something to give because it's not all been taken away. The giving has begun. And so now the obvious thing he's saying is the garden is no longer enclosed. The spring is no longer shut up. The fountain is no longer sealed. And you know what God says? That's good. Verses 13 and 15, your plants are an orchard of pomegranates with pleasant fruits, fragrant henna, with spikenard and saffron, calamus and cinnamon, with all trees of frankincense, myrrh and aloes, with all the chief spices, a fountain of gardens, a well of living water, streams from Lebanon. Wow, there's a lot of music, color, and perfume going on here. This is beautiful ecstasy as God has intended it, and it was saved for him, so it wasn't all gone when he got to the garden. So God intended the garden to be enjoyed by the gardener, not by pests and rodents. So Solomon says in Proverbs 5, verses 15 through 19, drink water, yes, but from your own cistern, running water from your own well. Should your fountains be dispersed abroad, streams of water in the streets? Let them be only your own and not for strangers with you. Is he talking about water? Is he saying never let anyone else borrow some water from you if they're thirsty? Of course not. He's talking about sex. He says, no, rejoice with the wife of your youth. Let her breasts satisfy you at all times. It means protect the garden until you want to give it to someone, not something. Save yourself, not for something, but for someone. Now, I know inevitably many singles in our promiscuous day will think, Pastor, it's too late for me. I've already let someone trample my garden. Do you know what? The good news, the gospel is, it's not too late. God forgives the past and he gives new futures. Just because someone or several someones have trampled your private garden doesn't mean that you should give up and let your garden continue to be trashed even more. Repent and rebuild and close the garden again. Put up a fence, keep the rodents out. And guess what? The fruit will grow again. And you'll have something to give to that special someone. Save yourself and start today. Verse 16. She responds. Here is the climax of the book, pun intended. She surrenders to him and says, awake, O north wind, and come, O south. Blow upon my garden, that its spices may flow out. Let my beloved come to his garden and eat its pleasant fruits. She surrenders to him, receives him into her garden. The marriage is consummated. And in chapter 5, verse 1, he replies, I have come to my garden, my sister, my spouse. I have gathered my myrrh with my spice. I've eaten my honeycomb with my honey. I have drunk my wine with my milk. I think it's fair to say it's a great garden, and they are both fulfilled. And this is what God intended, and that's what God intends for you. Will you choose it, or will you settle for less? When we got the wedding invitation and the honeymoon invitation, we couldn't help but ask, what does he see in her? I mean, he is the handsome prince, the rich king. He could have anyone he wanted, but he wanted her, the sunburned commoner. And we have to ask, if we are going to apply this to us, what does God see in us? What do we have to offer him? Nothing, right? But he does see something in us. Isaiah 62:5. As the bridegroom rejoices over the bride, so shall your God rejoice over you. He loves you. What does he see in you? He just loves you because he does. And he sees beauty that we don't even see. But we're glad that he does. He sees beauty in you. Will you give yourself to him? You know, I once said of my wife before I dated her, I pity the man who marries her because he'll be lost and I was wrong, not lost in the pile of stuff that she had in her bin above her seat in the bus. He'll be lost in her love. My wife said, I pity the girl that marries him because she'll just be a book on a shelf. I want you to know that my wife is not a book on my shelf. She's the whole shelf. She's the whole kit and caboodle. And that's the way it ought to be in marriage, but that's the way God wants your relationship to be with him too. Let's pray. Lord, thank you for your great love for us. Thank you for loving us enough to make us in your image so that we could be loved by you and love you, and for making us male and female so that we could enjoy the fulfillment of that kind of love in marriage. Lord, I pray that marriages that are weak will be strengthened, that young people who are looking forward to marriage would save themselves not for marriage but their marriage partner. Lord, help us to take advice from this beautiful book on something that you say is good and is not a four-letter word. For in Christ's name we pray. Amen. Join us next time for one final study. You can go back and watch a morning service 3 weeks ago when we talk about how to keep the fire burning. But next Sunday night we'll finish our study in Song of Solomon.